Techno has always been some mystery to me, and I generally love electronic music, but for some reason with techno it never really clicked, and I wonder if it's because I'm a drummer, so I have some quite large rhythmic ego that quickly gets attacked if things are too monotonous, like the kick drum in techno, or maybe I just didn't listen to the right stuff, because lately I found myself in situations where I got really intrigued by techno and got extremely curious on how I can play techno as a drummer on my small electronic drum pad. So I played acid techno, industrial techno, minimal techno, and many more styles, and basically had the time of my life because it's incredibly fun to play this as a drummer, and it led to this video that will just show you the different types of techno that are around. So what makes some acid sound an acid sound, what makes things sound industrial or minimal. Of course, things overlap a lot, so there's not like the purely industrial techno, there can also be elements of other styles, but just for understanding those words, it was extremely helpful for me and hope it will be helpful for you as well. My name is Yannis, and let's first start by looking at the origins of techno music. The genre of techno emerged in the city of Detroit and also led to the term Detroit techno for music from that era. And I absolutely enjoyed listening to some music, and I want to link you one particular playlist which is kind of a sampler with Detroit techno also from back in that time that you can find on YouTube, because it's just such an open playground feel that I didn't expect. Nowadays with electronic music the genres seem, still quite open, but in techno there are certain elements that seem quite fixed. And I feel like back then it was really open and people were looking for ways of expressing themselves, which I find incredibly inspiring. Soundwise you can hear strong influences of Kraftwerk, Jean-Michel Jarre, house music, or also Giorgio Moroder, who was using lots of sequencers. And I want to give you some example of some Detroit beat, but actually you could find different examples because, as I mentioned, it's such an open feel to the music. But for my example, I was just building some steady 4-on-the-floor kick drum pattern. Some hi-hat pattern that dances around the kick, because that's a major difference to house music, where the hi-hat pattern often sounds kind of the same with different phrasings and tones, but you kind of have those 16th notes and the offbeat. Here you build some sort of counter rhythm to the kick drum, which just creates some interesting rhythmic interplay like this. And often you hear snares sounding quite mechanical but really active, so it's not just some 2 and 4 snare. You have fills and sometimes also longer cycles, so it's maybe like some 2-bar loop or a 4-bar loop, or just generally with variations, which makes the music sound really active. Here's some example. The bass part is often influenced by those sequences that have been around for quite a while already, and here's some typical example of some vintage synth bass sequence that goes well with this drum beat we created. Still, compared to house music, techno sounded more mechanical and more industrial, and for example you could create a melody that sounds a little more edgy and a little more harsh, and here's also a little example for that. Nevertheless, you can often hear some nostalgic touch brought in through some synth pad, for example, so here's some more atmosphere added to the music. This beat might be a little busy already, but I wanted it to contain lots of elements that show you something that is representative for that era. But again, I highly encourage you to listen to some stuff by yourself to kind of absorb this open atmosphere. It's really inspiring to me. And then later, coming out of this kind of open atmosphere, there were more refined styles that we're going to explore now. Let's start with minimal techno, which describes some conscious reduction of elements. So instead of building up your huge wall of sound, which is really easy, especially inside doors because you have like unlimited tracks, you really focus on little elements. So you maybe have like 1 or 2 melodies and a kick drum, and build up the intensity through small changes and minimalism. And I find this style incredibly inspiring. And there's one track that I find super representative for it that I warmly invite you to check out, which is Minus by Robert Hood. And inspired by the track, I was actually turning on my Perfourmer and programmed also like a little arrangement for it that has basically one synth sequence with little variations and a steady kick drum. And speaking about minimalism, the Perfourmer is actually perfect for it because you have 4 independent voices, but not more. So in my opinion, it's absolutely inviting for minimal techno tracks. And here's my little take on it, where you can see that this melody slowly evolves, but it's a very focused sound. Well, minimal techno can sound already quite melodic. There's also a specific genre called melodic techno, and it usually describes some more harmony-focused, arrangement-focused sound. So as soon as there are more chord progressions with changing bass notes, changing chords through pads or arpeggios, it gets into the melodic direction, and often you hear some charismatic synth line as well. There's quite some crossfade between melodic techno, melodic house, and also progressive techno and progressive house, because they always describe this more melodic chord-focused approach that also sounds a little more mainstream, so it carries some hooks and just has this potential for being some earworm, for example. And progressive usually means that the arrangement is even longer, so it's even more arrangement focused and about long build-ups, so it takes a little more time. And I just tried to make some little beat example because the arrangement thing I can't really demonstrate in this video. So let's again use some 4-on-the-floor kick drum, some more steady hi-hat pattern with some opening on the offbeat. And for the melodic parts, we're going to use the Perfourmer again. So there's one very charismatic bass line that carries a lot of melodic information already. And on top there's this arpeggio with 3 shifting oscillators that creates a very atmospheric sound, and together with the melodic bass, a super melodic sound. If you're slowing down the tempo, using less high-frequency based sounds and also use lots of space and reverb, you're quickly in the territory of dub techno, which is a super fun style as well. So for this one, we use a kick drum that isn't as punchy as the one from before. A very simple offbeat hi-hat. A very small sounding, but in my opinion, super tasteful bass line. And maybe the most important part is this rhythmic synth line that is basically drained in reverb and delay and plays a little rhythmic figure with 2 pitches, so it almost sounds like some little chords, and also a little melodic figure in the end. And what you can often hear in dub techno is some sort of noise percussion thing going on in the background, also drained in reverb, creating some sort of Foley, and it's also super fun to create this type of sound. Just a quick mention, you can download all the sounds I use in this video as WAV files for free. The link is down below in the description, but you're also warmly invited to consider donating a little because it was quite some work to put together this video. And if you're using the Nord drum and are interested in having those sounds as Nord drum sounds, they will be available in the future, and if you subscribe to my email list, you'll be sure to get notified whenever this pack will be ready. Link is also down below in the description. And there are some similar styles to dub techno. So for example, there's hypnotic techno, which also has some more mellow kick drum and some sort of drony bass synth playing around it. And on top you add some very spacious melodies, so always use reverb, but it has to contain spicy intervals, so it's enough to use like 2 or 3 different pitches, but it needs to be spicy ones, so here's some example for that. And again, any type of noise Foley in the background supports the music really well. And if you take away the spicy melody and the drony synth and just use some general ambient textures on top of some kick drum, you can just call it ambient techno, and it could sound like this. And those 3 types of techno can also be described as deep techno, because deep usually describes slower tempos and this more chilled, laid-back vibe that also uses sounds that are really hypnotic or spacious with lots of effects. And it's more of some listening experience rather than something that you use for energizing the crowd on the dance floor. Now, instead of getting too spaced out by all those reverb-drained ambient textures, let's go the other way, meaning we make stuff more aggressive. And one cool style for that is Acid Techno, which has been all about one instrument, which is a Roland TB303 sequencer, creating very iconic bass lines with a very, very particular resonance sound. And here I tried to replicate it inside Ableton Live with the stock synth Drift, and you can just see if you can transfer those settings maybe to your own DAW or synth. So you see the resonance is really high, and I also added lots of envelopes in order to enhance that kind of resonant movement. And also those sequences were very chromatic, so they don't really sound melodic. They basically, you can basically call them random melodies that create this iconic sound. And here I just used the steady kick drum and also hi-hat pattern, because in Acid Techno this sequence is really in the foreground. By the way, this video is not going to focus much on sound design, but if you're interested in that, I made many videos about it. So both for Ableton Live and the Nord drum. You can find many videos on my channel. The links are down below in the description, so you're warmly invited to check them out. Industrial techno is also really fun because it basically celebrates distortion, noise, and any type of concept of manipulating your sound. And here I just used some very, very driven kick. Some offbeat pattern that is between a bass synth and a drum, of course also very distorted. Some haunting, screaming noise layer. And some more noise for some offbeat percussion to just drive the music a little more. And not so far from industrial techno, and often elements from both get mixed anyways, is dark techno. And here I feel like it has the most massive kick drums, not necessarily with distortion like with industrial techno. Here it's more about the space, so often you can hear reverb with the kick drum and also some kind of rumbling underneath, often with like reverb and delay created from the kick drum that gives you this ongoing rumbliness, and it's a very unsettling feel, but at the same time extremely intense and atmospheric. It sounds great together with a hi-hat pattern based on 16th notes and also using some reverb. And this is not necessarily the most melodic style, but it's cool to add some kind of dark pad, so you reduce lots of the high frequency content and just make the whole sound even darker than it already is. If you really speed up the tempo, you're in the territory of hard techno, and here it gets really energetic, and basically this style is all about the energy. So you use again a 4-on-the-floor kick drum, rather aggressive. Then you often hear this offbeat bass synth that makes the music sound incredibly vivid. Some 16th note hi-hat pattern that just adds the forward motion to the music. And then you just add more energy, preferably through modulated, saturated, distorted sounds. So here's some ring modulated sound from my Nord drum. Just a very monotonous one-note melody, but I think it goes well with the beat. And actually I tried playing something with a trance type motive on top of it, which I actually liked. It made the music even more intense, and it sounds like this. And this was my maybe a little naive but also warm-hearted look at techno music from my drummer's perspective, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I mean, there are more styles that you can find, but these were the ones I thought I can demonstrate in the best possible way. But you're also warmly invited to share down below in the comments any additional thoughts or remarks you have about techno. Also, if you want to correct me, I'm really open for that. And what I did in this video, I already did with house music, and you can find the video here, warm invitation to check it out. Also, all links I mentioned you can find down below in the description, also warm invitation to check them out, and another warm invitation also to subscribe to my channel in case you're new here. Apart from that, I wish you lots of inspiration with whatever it is that you create, and hope to see you soon again at this channel. Bye!